Kia ora, and welcome to the Cleine Line. I'm Jamie Cleine, former Mayor of Bulla. These days, I'm using my experience in local and national leadership to reflect on life on the coast, the challenges facing our communities, and the issues shaping New Zealand. This isn't the official line, it's the Cleine Line. Straight talk, no spin, no script, just honest reflections from the coast, and sometimes on what's happening from the halls of Parliament too. I've lived on the West Coast long enough to know the seasons by the river, not the calendar. The first frost means, well, gee, I wish I'd got that firewood in a little earlier. That first gusty easterly means my washing got blown into next week. And whitebaiters' cars parked in weird places around our riverbanks and bridges, well, that's how I know spring has arrived. Whitebait. For some, it's a novelty, a treat you might buy once a year or a token of family nostalgia. For others, especially here in Bulla and on the West Coast, it's more than that. It's ritual, tradition, obsession even, and for many, an essential top-up to the bank balance. So today on the Cleine Line, I want to explore it fully. What actually is whitebait? Where did this tradition begin? And why do otherwise sensible adults willingly spend hours in cold, wet water watching a net, convinced today is their day? So let's start right at the beginning. What is whitebait? Well, scientifically, they're the juvenile stage of several native galaxid species. The banded cockapoo, the giant cockapoo, koaro, inanga, and the short-jaw cockapoo. These tiny fish begin life high in our forested headwaters, hatching in shaded creeks and seepages. When heavy rain comes, they're washed downstream to the rivers and out to sea, where they spend several months growing before instinct draws them back inland. When they return, as glimmering threads of life, no longer than a matchstick, they make that remarkable journey against the current, riding the tides and pushing up the same rivers that once carried them out. For a few short weeks each spring, they pass through the estuaries and river mouths of the West Coast. And that's when the season begins. That's whitebait season. Culturally, though, whitebait is something far greater than biology. It's a signal, the changing of the season, the first whisper of spring. It's an inheritance passed down through generations. The same nets, the same spots, the same thermos full of tea. Families gather at their favourite bends and creeks, catching up as much as catching fish. For Māori, these species, inanga especially, have long been an important food source and are woven into stories of migration and place. The mahinga kai tradition reminds us that the fishery isn't just a harvest, it's a relationship, a balance between taking what you need and ensuring the run will return again next year. So yes, officially, whitebait are fish larvae, but in Bulla and across the coast, they're also memory, ritual, and community. They're the shimmer in the river that says, you're home. Whitebaiting has long been a part of rhythm of life on the coast. Not just a pastime, but a tradition that runs deep in our identity. Across Bulla's waterways, the mighty Kawatiri itself, the Otawaiti, Mohokanui, and the Okari, and further south to the Arahura, home of Ngāti Waiwai. Each river carries its own stories and its own guardians. Recently, I spoke with Ngāti Waiwai kaumātua Ned Taufuri. I started by asking him to share his family connection to the Arahura and some of his earlier childhood memories.
I stopped whitebaiting myself, got to be about 20, 25 years ago, when my daughter, when she got married, the Arahura River was the only privately owned river in the country. And of course, we've got all panels there that gone down through the families, the one that I've finished up with. And then when my daughter got married, and so her husband, he loved fishing and all that sort of stuff. So I said to them, well, you may as well have ours, and as long as you give me and Mum a feed, that'll be good. He loved it, eh? I can remember, back when we were kids growing up in Arahura, And I guess I dare say the would have been the same right up and down the country. The amount of whitebait they used to catch back in the day. They used to bury the stuff in the gardens and all that sort of stuff. So and those days are long gone. What we found, especially as young ones growing up in Aotearoa, and every year a group of us would get together and would build a couple of whitebait huts down the river for the kaumātua to sit in when it's raining and down there so they wouldn't get wet and all that sort of stuff. But it was also a good place to catch up, even though, you sort of live in the same place, you don't get to see people that often. So, that was a perfect place to catch up with all relations and have a bit of a chat and do all the other thing as well. If you knew what greenstone would look like, well, you'd go off and look for a bit of greenstone as well.
Ned also described the importance of whitebait for sharing among iwi and whānau, and its use as a koha when local iwi attend larger iwi gatherings across the South Island.
With the mussel bed at Aotearoa, was just on the other side or virtually down the mouth of the Aotearoa River. So, while you're whitebaiting, and if the tide was right, was out, you'd pop down and get some mussels and bring them home as well. So, yeah, but it used to be a lot of fun, especially as when we were growing up, but also as we got a bit older, and then we started had a wee fishing club where we used to meet up every now and again, and we'd get the set nets for clowners and what have you, and go out and set them and again, and whatever was caught, then that was spread out around the park for people to have a feed in it. Fellows from home, and one of them still does it now. Whatever he catches, the first thing that he does, he takes a feed around to all the kaumātua. Yeah, so they dearly love him. Yeah, well, what normally happens every whitebait season, and then with the Ngāi Tahu, iwi Tau happening in November, what normally happens is that there's a bit of whitebait caught over here, then that's given to the organisers wherever the hui is going to be held as a contribution from taipōtini and, like the whitebait, the koha.
Changing weather patterns and climate-induced frequency of severe weather is also impacting the ability for Ned and his whānau to fish in their usual spots.
Where my son-in-law fishes, once the tide starts coming in, then he can't fish because he's in the middle of two rivers. And so that climate change doesn't really not doing us any favours. And, like I can remember when, especially on the south side of the Aotearoa River, you used to be able to get some good channels in along there, but you can't now, because it's either too deep or too flat, and then you've got to turn around and spend quite a bit of money building big stands and all the rest of it.
The final part of my conversation with Ned was where he reflected on the use of whitebait as a kind of bush currency.
My son-in-law, one thing when he got mixed up with my daughter, what I noticed about him when they started talking about getting married and then buying a house and all that sort of stuff. And anyway, when they were buying their house, of course, they needed a lawyer. They went and done a bit of bartering with his schoolmate. And I don't know how much whitebait he had to give this fellow, but that was his payment for his fee.
After talking with Ned about the whanangatanga and the deep cultural connection Māori have with the rivers, I wanted to explore the other side of the story, the European traditions that have grown up alongside it. Here on the coast, whitebaiting has become part of everyone's DNA, a seasonal ritual that mixes patience, pride, and a touch of competitiveness. It's one of those things that seems really simple, but anyone who's ever done it knows it's anything but. To get that perspective, I caught up briefly with Gary, one of the long-time locals who's been whitebaiting around the Orowaiti and Buller rivers for decades.
We've been fishing since 1975-76 in the Orowaiti. In the same spot, so we've been registered there since the same time. Fishing's been up and down, but the fishing's up and down because of the weather. If you get a spring like we're having now, wish you'd go and talk to Doc and say, can we cancel September and fish October, November this year because the fish are going to be late. The biggest adjustment to the fish numbers, they've been pretty good over the years, and probably in the mid-90s was good. The huge floods we had in 2021, 22, we lost probably all the spawning stock, all the eggs, everything got washed out to sea. The numbers just haven't built back yet, but they are building a little. A lot of the stands below the Oroedi Bridge, there's probably 10, 15 there in the 80s. And they changed the rule, you could only be 6 metres from the bank. So all the people out in the middle of the mudflat disappeared, and there was a lot of them. They were catching a lot of fish. On a good season, it makes a huge difference to the town. We're talking big dollars. The buyer that I deal with pokes about $60,000 into the coast, and that's just over 2 trips. He'll come down and pick a ton up each time. So, yeah, it makes a huge difference.
People like Gary have seen it all, the good seasons and the lean ones. They talk about how the runs have changed over the years, how the tides seem different now, and how selling a bit of bait for cash used to be enough to top up the family budget. It's a very familiar story. There's a quiet pride in the way they tell it, that sense of self-reliance that's a pure West Coast thing. For people like Gary, it's not just about the catch, it's about turning up, knowing your spot, and reading the river better than anyone else. Listening to him took me straight back to my own early memories, to my Nana Eileen and her best friend Rowie out at Deadman's Creek. They'd pack the old Ford Cortina full of gear, park up early and set their nets before the sun was properly up. Then they'd settle in for the day, folding chairs, thermos of tea, a few sandwiches, and keep a watchful eye on the current. Nana had a favourite trick. If anyone wandered past and asked how they were going, she'd smile sweetly and say, "Not much today," while quietly nudging the bucket of bait further under the chair. The truth was, if the fish were running, they'd have a good feed by lunchtime and enough to share or maybe sell by the end of the week. It wasn't greed really, it was part of the game. A quiet understanding among coasters that your best spot stays secret, your catch stays hidden, and your stories grow bigger with every retelling. Those rivers, the Oroedi, the Bulla, and the little creeks in between like Deadman's, have shaped generations. Whether you're there for a few dollars, a meal, or just the ritual of waiting for the tide to turn, whitebaiting brings people together in a way few other things do. Of course, for all the history and character tied up in whitebaiting, there's also the practical side, the rules that keep the fishery alive. Because while the season still brings that familiar buzz across the coast, the truth is, the resource isn't endless. The Department of Conservation has been working to manage whitebait in a way that keeps the species and the tradition alive and sustainable. And that balance certainly isn't simple. The rules can feel frustrating for locals who've grown up on the riverbanks, but they're there for a reason. To get the official view, I spoke with Sean Judd, Department of Conservation's Biodiversity Manager for the Northern West Coast.
Department of Conservation role in relation to the whitebait fishery is probably first and foremost is looking after it, monitoring habitat, doing what we can to restore habitat, and a lot of that is certainly undertaking some research, to actually know accurately what's going on. As we know, whitebait come and land in the streams and creeks and need to reproduce. And it's what they find there as to whether, that's successful or a failure. And the obvious one is creek pollution, that type of thing, or even just a lack of habitat where, streams are altered or removed or drained. So the research has been quite interesting. I know last year they worked out that willow trees, of all things, were shading a lot of the creeks and streams, and that had an adverse impact on habitat for whitebait. So there was a big program there, some external funding, and a lot of those willow trees, and people may have noticed that, were poisoned and removed from some of these creeks. So we hope all these things, will have a positive impact in the future. And I guess the second most important thing the department does in relation to that is they undertake the compliance in terms of the fishery as well. We're out there as much as we can. We can't be everywhere, of course. There's quite a vast area, but yep, we target the areas where most of the fishing takes place, and we obviously get a lot of information fed back to us too in terms of things when it's not right. And there are certain areas where, it's a bit disappointing. We go there and we find, clear breaches of the fishing regulations, breaches of the law. One of the things that were out there, yes, the regulations are there. Yes, they control how we could, should, and fish fairly. One little thing we're coming across time and time again is the actual litter and rubbish around some of the sites. It's the old story. You get some people doing the right thing and doing really well, but there's quite a number. I would have to say at the end of last season, quite a depressing number of people that left an awful lot of crap and rubbish right by this beautiful waterway. They're there, they have the privilege and the ability to be able to take whitebait, and I think it's only fair that, that they should take their rubbish with them. The bags that are turning up, the sandbags, those bags are not designed to last out in the weather. They're actually, quite a few of them delaminate, fall to pieces, and you've got that woven bag going straight into our waterway. And look, it's just not okay. We've got to be smarter than this. A lot of work's gone into some signage and some rules and regs being, spelled out, I guess, on our website. So if people are unsure, we encourage you to go and have a look there. But look, there is a darker side to this. There are some people that, for whatever motivation or greed or whatever, I know money's involved, so, people come up with some interesting ways to cheat the system. And we have seen fishing in areas that are banned from fishing, like the Martins Creek area. Frequently we're seizing 1 or 2 nets out of there during the season, footmarks, evidence of fishing. Really disappointing. People, some blatantly fishing, screens right across, certainly more than a quarter, and in some cases nearly blocking up the entire waterway, and, that's just not fair. We do have a loss of habitat over time, but that's pretty obvious, I believe. There's been a loss of habitat. So if you just put straight over the top of that people can fish anyway, anyhow, anytime, then again, the fishery, I'd be quite confident, would be under absolute threat. Bit of an assumption where people think, it's been fine for a long time, so it could continue to be fine. I don't believe that we should have those attitudes. I think if we take our eye off the ball, don't take this seriously in terms of the habitat and the way we fish it, respect it and look after it, I think that we'll be setting up our future kids and future families and people that want to, fish here in the future. We're setting them up to fail. So real responsibility to make sure we're doing the right thing and just being fair. It's about fairness.
It's also clear there's a number of community opportunities to get involved in supporting the efforts of the Department of Conservation in protecting the species and the habitat that supports it.
Yeah, look, there's a range of things that the community, I think, can do, landowners in particular, but they can take steps to enhance the whitebait fishery and make sure it's here in perpetuity, and that's looking after our waterways, riparian margin planting. There's some guidelines around how you can enhance waterways, and I don't think any waterway is too small or insignificant. We shouldn't overlook any of those creeks and tributaries and what have you. Riparian planting, keeping stock out of it in certain areas, being really vigilant in terms of what discharges might be going into creeks. And I mean, if everyone can do their own little bit to enhance that, well then again we're setting ourselves up for success in the future in terms of the fishery. And local community groups too. I mean, there's a range of creeks out there that could do with a bit of TLC, I suppose. The Department of Conservation does what it can, but we certainly don't have the resources to have an impact on all the tributaries around here. So we do rely on community work, and there's a lot of projects currently underway all through the Buller that are working here to look after our creeks, which is just so important.
So it seems plausible that at least some of the galaxid species are now threatened. Changes in land use, sedimentation and habitat loss have all taken a toll. The department's challenge is to protect those species without erasing the community traditions that have defined the coast. And that's where it gets tricky, because the system works best when it's not just DOC writing the rules, but local people help shape them and get involved too. The coast rivers, from Karamea in the north to Haast in the south, are all different. One rulebook can't always fit every catchment, every tide, or every community. And that's really the heart of it, the balance between local rights and species protection for the future. If we want our kids and grandkids to know what it's like to stand in the river at dawn and see that silver shimmer on the tide, we all have a part to play. It's not about taking the fun out of the season. It's about making sure there is a season in years to come. Every year, near the end of October, Labour Weekend brings the Westport Whitebait Festival. Live music, cooking competitions, and a celebration of everything this tiny fish represents. It's a chance for the community to gather, share stories, and honour the season coming to a close. Whether you fish, cook, or simply watch, it's a reminder of why whitebait matters, not just for the table, but for the culture, the families, and the rivers themselves. Whitebait is more than a fish. It's a patience, a connection, and a seasonal rhythm that links generations. From the elders passing knowledge to the youngest first-timers, it's a tradition that blends sustenance, culture, and joy. As the river runs, so does the season. And as long as we honour the rules, the river, and the moments in between, the whitebait will continue to return. Just as we do, year after year. To close the podcast, I return to Ned Taufuri down there at Arahura Marae, where he shares with pride his role in cooking the whitebait for the whānau.
I'm the whitebait cooker in my house, and I'm sure they only humour me, but they reckon my whitebait batters are the best ones I've ever had. This couple of eggs and a wee bit of flour to keep them together and put them in the pan. That's a good idea to get me to cook them.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening to the Cleine Line. This podcast is here to spark conversation, share a bit of insight, and shine a light on the things that matter to Buller. But I also want to hear what matters to you. If there's an issue you'd like my thoughts on, someone in the community we should feature, or a topic you think deserves some airtime, send me an email, jamie@theclineline.com. I'll be back next time with more updates, reflections, and what's been happening around the district. Until then, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk again soon.